In March of 2026, about 5 miles east of the Port Canaveral coast, a Florida fishing captain named Blair Wiggins was on the water with a camera running when something surfaced beside his boat. He thought at first he was looking at a manta ray, then a whale shark. It took him a moment to understand that neither was correct. The animal circled the boat for close to 20 minutes. Wiggins estimated it at 15 feet. He described it later as a monster. He also said something that matters more than the estimate. He had been on this earth 60 years, and that was the second great white he had ever seen. 2 in 60 years. Now hold that number, because the thing about Wiggins is that he is not unusual anymore. He is part of a pattern. 2 months earlier, in January, a couple out watching dolphins on Florida's Gulf Coast surfaced a video of the same species. Days before that, 27 miles west of the Venice Jetty, another group of boaters filmed one. That sighting went to Dr. Bob Huter, the first director of the Center for Shark Research at Mote Marine Laboratory, a man who has studied sharks for decades. He looked at the footage and confirmed it. A legitimate sighting, he said, and he was confident. He also said something that should have been bigger news than it was. About half a dozen great white sharks were in Gulf waters at that moment, not passing through. There, and the reports are not stopping at the open Gulf. They are moving inward, toward the passes, toward the bays, toward the water that people in Louisiana and Texas and the Florida Panhandle call lakes. That is the part nobody has an answer for. Before any of that means anything, you have to understand what the textbook says, because the textbook is very clear and it says, this cannot happen. A great white shark is a saltwater animal in the most absolute sense the word allows. Its body carries a higher concentration of dissolved solids than the sea around it, mostly urea, and a compound called trimethylamine oxide. That internal chemistry is what keeps the ocean from pulling the water out of its tissues. Put that animal in fresh water and the physics reverse. Water floods inward, cells swell, cells rupture. There is no organ in a white shark that can stop it. This is not a matter of preference or tolerance. Bull sharks can do it. River sharks in the Glyphis genus can do it. A great white cannot, and no amount of gradual acclimation changes that, because the species simply does not carry the equipment. So when a report comes in describing a white shark inside an American lake, there's a single clean answer waiting. It is not possible. Move on. Except the answer depends entirely on a word that almost nobody stops to examine. Look at what an American lake actually is on the Gulf Coast. Lake Pontchartrain sits on the northern edge of New Orleans. It covers roughly 630 square miles. It runs about 12 to 14 feet deep across most of that span. Every map in the country prints the word lake across it, and every person who grew up on its shore calls it one. It is not one. Britannica describes it as closer to a tidal lagoon because a narrow passage connects it directly to the Gulf of Mexico. Salt water moves in and out of it with the tide. The same is true of Lake Borgne. The same is true of the Calcasieu system further west. These are not enclosed bodies of fresh water. They are arms of the ocean that happen to have a freshwater word printed on them, and that changes the question completely. The barrier everyone assumes exists between the Gulf and these lakes is not a wall. It is a door. It has always been a door. It is open right now, and it has been open every day for as long as anyone has been counting. Which means the only real question left is whether there is anything on the other side of it big enough to matter. There is. And this is where the second half of the story starts, because the animals in that water are not what they were 30 years ago. On the 17th of January 2025, a research team from the nonprofit OC working about 45 miles off the Florida and Georgia coast, brought a male white shark alongside their vessel and tagged it. They named him Contender. He measured 13 feet 9 inches. He weighed 1,653 pounds. He is the largest white shark ever recorded in the Atlantic. Now, here is the detail that reframes everything, and almost every outlet that covered Contender buried it. Dr. Harley Newton, OSARCH's chief scientist and veterinarian, explained that male white sharks reach maturity at around 11.5 feet at roughly 26 years of age. Contender, at nearly 14 feet, is somewhere in his early 30s. Newton described him as early in his reproductive life. Early. A shark the size of a small boat, the largest ever measured in an entire ocean basin, and he is at the beginning. White sharks do not stop growing. There is no adult size they reach and hold. They keep adding length for as long as they keep living, which is why the largest white shark known anywhere in the world, a female in the Pacific estimated near 19 feet, is also thought to be close to 70 years old. So the size of the sharks in any given stretch of water is not really a question about the sharks. It is a question about how many of them have been allowed to get old, and that is exactly what changed. White sharks were hunted hard through the second half of the 20th century, and the film that came out in 1975 made it worse in a way that is difficult to overstate. Populations fell, protections came late. When they finally arrived, they did the only thing protection can do. They let animals survive long enough to age. Look at what the historical record for the Gulf actually contains. In February of 1950, a newspaper in Brownsville reported a great white caught off Port Aransas in Texas, 7 feet. That same month, in the same area, 2 more were taken at 11 feet 4 inches and 12 feet 2 inches. There are long line catches logged off Sarasota in 1937 and again in 1943. A large one seen off a Texas oil platform in 1964. A female taken near St. Petersburg in 1965. Those were the giants of their era. 7 feet, 11, 12. Set that against a 15-foot animal circling a boat off Port Canaveral in March of 2026, and a 13-foot 9-inch male who scientists say is only getting started. The reports are not just more frequent, they are describing bigger animals, and the reason is not mysterious once you understand the biology. It is what happens when a species that never stops growing is finally left alone long enough to do it. Then, in March of 2026, a study came out that closed the last gap in the picture. Published in the journal Wildlife Research, it followed 92 white sharks tagged between Nova Scotia and Jacksonville over more than a decade, using satellite tags, pop-up archival tags, and acoustic tags. The researchers wanted to know where the western North Atlantic population goes in winter. 57 of them, more than 60%, spent significant time in the Gulf of Mexico or the Straits of Florida. Not in transit, not passing through. There from roughly December through May. For years, the assumption had been that these animals only crossed the Gulf occasionally, on their way somewhere else. The tracking data killed that assumption. Many of the sharks stayed for weeks or months. Many came back in later years to the same water, a behavior researchers call site fidelity. The study logged them concentrating along the outer edge of the West Florida shelf and around Pulley Ridge, a deep reef system west of Florida, making repeated dives toward 500 meters and returning. In March of 2024, several were observed feeding on a sperm whale carcass on the shelf itself. And there was one more finding, quieter than the rest. Some of the mature females made deep offshore movements that resemble what has been associated with gestation in other white shark populations elsewhere in the world. Nobody is claiming they are breeding down there. Nobody can rule it out either. So put the 3 lines together and look at where they cross. The sharks are in the northern Gulf, in numbers every winter, and they return to the same water year after year. They are the largest recorded in living memory. And the biggest one ever measured is described by the scientist who tagged him as early in his life. And the lakes along that coast are not lakes at all, but tidal arms of the same ocean those sharks are sitting in, connected by open passes that nothing is guarding. 3 separate bodies of evidence, none of them speculative, all converging on the same stretch of water. And in that stretch of water, along the seawalls and the causeways and the bayou mouths, people keep saying they have seen something that does not belong there. Something too big, something the wrong shape. Here is where the honest part of this has to be said, and it has to be said clearly. Not one of those lake reports has ever been confirmed. There is no body. There's no verified photograph. There's no measured specimen taken from Pontchartrain or Borgne or Calcasieu and identified in a laboratory as Carcharodon carcharias. Every account is a person and a memory and a description, filed away or repeated on a doc or posted online, and then nothing. And the scientific position deserves to be stated at its strongest, not its weakest. Dr. John Carlson, a research biologist with NOAA Fisheries in Panama City, has been direct about it. White sharks are generally not found in estuaries. They are a coastal and offshore animal, and that is where the tracking data puts them. Dr. Huter confirming that Venice sighting was equally direct that these sharks stay well offshore, often 100 miles or more, and that swimmers have no cause for concern. Some of the accounts that have circulated do not survive contact with evidence at all. Shark reports from American inland waters have a long history of turning out to be misidentified bull sharks, which genuinely do enter these lakes every summer and which the public routinely cannot tell apart from a white shark at a distance. Others have turned out to be nothing. In the scientific literature on inland shark occurrences, at least one long-accepted 20th century record was formally revisited and reclassified as a probable hoax in a correction published by the same researchers who had originally examined it. That is what the evidence for the lakes amounts to. Reports, unverified, uncorroborated, and in some cases demonstrably wrong. But absence of confirmation is not the same thing as absence, and the reason has less to do with sharks than with what those lakes actually are. Lake Pontchartrain covers 630 square miles. Its water is turbid and shallow, and visibility in most of it is measured in inches. There is no camera network across it. There is no acoustic array listening to it. The population of bull sharks that unquestionably does use that lake every summer has never been properly counted, and the reason given is straightforward. The lake is too large and too unmonitored to count anything in. If a body of water cannot produce a reliable number for the sharks everyone agrees are in it, it is not going to produce a photograph of one that nobody is looking for. An animal moving through that water on a tide, staying deep, staying briefly, leaves nothing behind. No tag ping unless it was tagged. No sighting unless someone happened to be looking at the right patch of brown water at the right moment. No record at all unless it dies somewhere a person walks. So this is where it sits. The reports from inside those lakes remain exactly what they have always been. Unconfirmed, unresolved, not proven, and never formally dismissed either, because there has never been anything solid enough to dismiss. What is not in question is everything around them. The passes are open, and they have always been open. The sharks are in the Gulf every winter in numbers that surprised the researchers who counted them. They are returning to the same water year on year. And they are larger now than at any point in the recorded history of that coastline, because the largest one anyone has ever measured is still, in the words of the scientist who tagged him, early in his life. Somewhere off the West Florida shelf tonight, there is an animal 14 feet long that has another 40 years of growing left in it, sitting in water that connects without a single barrier between, to a lake with a city on its shore. Nobody is watching that water. Whatever people keep seeing in it stays unproven, the way things stay unproven when there is nobody there to prove them.